Joining us now, Corey Lewandowski. Corey, former campaign manager, Trump campaign, author of 2 New York Times best-selling books, Let Trump Be Trump, Trump's Enemies. He's with us now. We expect him to be possibly running for U.S. Senate in New Hampshire. I've said this before. If he runs, he's senator. Simple as that. That's what I believe. And he's joining us now. Corey, welcome.
Hey, John. Good morning to you.
Hey, let me just start with, I want to thank you, Corey. I know you said last week, and just let all of our audience know what a good guy Corey is. He knows that my family and I are huge Astro fans. When they played the Boston Red Sox, he got Joseph and I and Ann 3 tickets to go to Boston, and we had never been to Fenway. We got to go there, see the Astros play, and he said, hey, dude, if the Astros get in the World Series, I'm going to get you tickets for Friday night. You bring Joseph up, bring Ann up, and we'll go. And lo and behold, they did, and he did that. And Corey, I really want to thank you for that. My 15-year-old Joseph is so excited you can't believe it. So thank you.
Well, look, John, it's a special thing, as you know, to go to the World Series and in the nation's capital, which has not had a World Series ever, or at least in our lifetimes. It's great. I wish I could be there. I'm going to be home with my family up in New Hampshire, but I never welch on a bet. I don't even know if you can say that anymore, but I don't. And so you and the family will be going to the game Friday night, and it's my pleasure to be able to do it.
That is so fantastic, Corey, and thank you so much for that. And next year, maybe Boston will win again. It will simply alternate, right? 1 year Red Sox, 1 year Astros. It's probably the way it's
works for me. I'm happy to do that, yes. And anybody but the Yankees, John. You know that's always been my philosophy.
I know. So you're excited that the Astros beat them in that dramatic win on Saturday night. Meantime, the Patriots continue to win. I guess they're going to go undefeated this season. So I know you guys
they're actually unbelievable. You know, look, I watched the game last night. It was 24-0, I think, with 9 minutes to go in the second quarter. And I said, I don't think the Jets are making a comeback, just so we're clear. So
I don't think
it's just amazing how good Tom Brady is and how good the team always finds a way to win. They're just really an incredible team. They have an amazing coach, and they've got just such a simple philosophy. Do your job. Right. It's such a simple philosophy. Don't worry about what anyone else has to do. Just do your job. And, hey, they're 7-0, and they look really good.
They look like they're going to go 16-0. And be certainly in the Super Bowl again. I don't see anybody beating them in the AFC. Corey, let's get to your Senate race. I know you talked to the president the other day. Are you comfortable relaying some of that conversation?
Yeah, I had a great conversation with President Trump on Sunday. He called to ask me where I am on the Senate race. He called to encourage me to get into the race. And I told the president, and he knows this because his family has unfortunately had to live through the disparagement that comes with running for office. And I told the president, I was very candid. The biggest concern in my family right now is the impact on our children. I've got a 13-year-old daughter who, she'll be 13 on Friday. It's a very difficult age from a social media side of things, a peer pressure side of things. And my 3 boys are a little bit younger. My wife is obviously very much on board with doing this, but we want to talk about the impact on our family holistically. And I talked to the president about it, who has a 13-year-old son, Barron, and the things that he has had to go through. The president completely understands it, and he understands my reservation about getting into a race which is still 13 months away from the election, and having my name impugned and my family's reputation impugned with tens of millions of dollars of negative advertising and the impact it's going to have on our kids. And the president knows that. He understands it. We talked about it a lot because he's in a very similar situation where, I'm sure he and his family have been attacked mercilessly, and there's an impact on that. And look, I talked to Laura Trump on the radio yesterday, and I thank the Trump family for all they've gone through. But right now, there's still some work to do on my family's end. We spent a lot of time talking about the Senate race this weekend here in New Hampshire with the family. And, my wife is on board. My 3 boys are on board. It's really my daughter. And it's also, John, part of it, as you know, is I have spent the better part of 5 years of my life now doing everything I humanly can do to help this president be successful under the barrage and the siege of the media And with this fake impeachment, phony scam going on in Washington, D.C., I want to make sure I can also continue to defend this president every day on television from this secretive, little Adam full of Schiff investigation, because he deserves better and the American people deserve better. And it is so imperative for me and my family and my children, hopefully someday my grandchildren, to make sure that Donald Trump is reelected President of the United States, because if he isn't, everything we have fought for will be reversed tenfold by having a socialist be the next President of the United States.
Corey, are you better off serving the president during this impeachment fiasco from the outside? Or, because once you run for Senate, I mean, once you announce, there's all kinds of federal regulations that go on. There's certain things you can and can't do, and other, also you're going to be running against other people. You've got to get the nomination. So where are you more valuable right now to Trump?
Well, and that's a great question. This president does not have a big team of defenders on television. There's a few of us. I put Matt Schlapp in that group. I put some members of Congress, Jimmy Jordan, Mark Meadows, Matt Gaetz, myself, Dave Bossie. There's a handful of people who go on TV on a regular basis to defend this president. And I think I'm one of those people. I think I'm a pretty good advocate on television for this president to the best of my ability. And I don't want to take a chess piece off the board, if you will. And, John, I have to remind your listeners, the U.S. Senate primary in New Hampshire is next September. It's 11 months away. And this impeachment inquiry is moving relatively quickly. And so as you look at it, to have the opportunity to continue to fight for the president on television, to articulate just how wrong this is to the American people in a setting which I'm not precluded from doing because I'm a candidate for office, I think is very important. And if the end of this year came and this impeachment investigation was over and January rolls around and I've decided I've done the best of my ability to defend this president, and then I want to get into the Senate race, and I have to run a race for 9 months, I think the people of New Hampshire will have plenty of Corey Lewandowski time in those 9 months and don't need, more right now. So I don't think it's an either-or decision for me. It's not an inflection point where you can only do one or the other. I think I have the ability to continue to fight for and defend this president against these baseless allegations and still run for the U.S. Senate come January if it's something that I feel is in the best interest of my family, the people of New Hampshire, and the President of the United States.
So Steve Bannon was on the other day, and he told me that the trial in the Senate is going to go forward. He believes the president will be impeached in the House, and he believes that the trial in the Senate will go through December, and he said it's going to be about 61 days from now, the whole thing. So my question to you is, it's going to be all hands on deck. There's a few of us, Corey, that are telling the White House that they need to take this impeachment investigation seriously. A lot of us don't think they've been maybe up to now, but we're ringing the bell because he's going to get impeached and the trial is going to go to the Senate, and he's going to have a couple of detractors in the Corey that just don't like him. And so we want to take this very seriously. Why not just be part of that team and just wait? What's the downside to waiting? I don't think there is a downside, John. I think you're exactly right. And I don't know if the White House has any interest in having a formal outside team put together to combat the negative stories that are taking place. I've expressed some concerns to the president on Sunday about the messaging coming from the building, about the rapid response program, about being proactive in the communication side. I don't think any of that is new information to anybody. But that being said, I also don't work in the building, and I can only imagine what it's like to spend 20 hours a day trying to put out a series of fires that we don't even know are potential embers that they're just putting out every day so that we don't get more bad stories. But I always think, and I made this mistake in the 2016 campaign, John, and I've been very candid about it, and I was criticized very highly when I was running the 2016 campaign. You can't win with a smaller team. You can't win by subtraction. And I was criticized by people in the 2016 campaign that I didn't grow the team fast enough, that I didn't bring enough people on board, that I didn't ramp up
and see where, the general election was going. And so, additional people came on board who I think were a mistake. And I speak specifically about Paul Manafort and Rick Gates. Those weren't the types of players we should have brought on board. But I think the White House is falling into that same trap. Mm-hmm. They're looking at shrinking the team and not growing the team. We don't have, unlike other presidents, we don't have a large group of outside advisors who have made a living in the swamp their entire lives who want to go on TV and advocate for this president. I mean, we do have some, but you have to grow that team, and you have to be more inclusive than less inclusive. And so I think that's something that from a strategy side, the White House would be wise to grow an outside entity, to whether it's formal or informal, to be working with certain individuals to proactively be pitching stories and talking about messaging points that are beneficial to the building, and let the people in the building, the government staffers, continue to deal with the day-to-day operations of working as a White House employee, and let people like me and others give us the tools and the resources to be successful so that we can proactively be pitching stories and be out there advocating on behalf of this president on a daily basis.
Well, that's exactly what you did when you were campaign manager, is you got an outside team together that was very effective. I was one of them, and we went on TV constantly, and they were not directly connected to the campaign. They weren't paid staffers, or they didn't go to your meetings and things of that nature, but they were involved in being able to amplify the message and articulate it in a meaningful way. I don't know why the White House isn't doing that. Now, when you asked the president about that, Corey, what was his reaction?
Well, look, the president understands how difficult and dishonest it is to deal with the media. He's seen it. He has seen it more than anybody. And he understands that even, you look at the issue of Syria, John, right, where the president made a decision, and this is, important, where the president made a decision to bring our men and women in uniform home, which is a position he had articulated in the campaign and now is fulfilling as the president. By the way, when Barack Obama said he was going to bring our men and women in uniform home, he was roundly praised by the media for doing the right thing. This president doesn't, and he's chastised. And, and what we need, and what I said to the president was, these are the types of incidences where when you have a large outside group that can amplify that, and we can put multiple surrogates on TV on a daily, hourly, weekly basis, right? And we just flood the airwaves with the benefits of bringing men and women home and fulfilling your campaign promises. We can push back on the narrative. And he said, well, Corey, the media is very dishonest. And I know it is. And I know it's dishonest. But this is a president more so than any that has been willing to push back on the fake stories, the false narratives, and call the media out. And so he knows that. He knows that they need to be more aggressive, particularly going into a general election in the next 14 months. And I think you're going to see, hopefully, the continuation of a growth at the campaign, which is not just campaign officials, but that loose-knit group of individuals that they pick up the phone and say, hey, Corey, can you go do some radio? Hey, Corey, can you go do some television? And not just Corey Lewandowski. Like, it's not about me, to be honest with you. It's about everybody and having that coordinated effort. And, look, the campaign has done some great work in building out some coalitions, which we never had the luxury to do. I spoke with Laura Trump yesterday. I spoke to Katrina Pearson yesterday. They're heading up these women's coalition, African-American coalition, Hispanic coalition, all of these different coalitions that are being put in place that are amplifying the president's message in their respective communities.
Right.
We just want them to do that on the media side as well, and I think it's very important.
So we're with Corey Lewandowski, former campaign manager, Trump campaign, seriously evaluating a run for U.S. Senate, New Hampshire. I've said this before. I'll say it again. If he runs, he wins. He's U.S. Senator. But it sounds like, Corey, you're going to wait now until after the potential impeachment thing goes and plays itself out. And because we're not talking about 6 months, we're talking about 61 days or 70 days, so it's not a long period of time. When you talk to the president about your race, point blank, did he encourage you to run and make a decision or not?
100%. Look, when I spoke to the president, he said, Corey, you should run. He said, you should run. He said, without giving away the store, I don't think he's ever met Jeanne Shaheen. I don't speak for the president, but, she's a woman who is basically a non-factor in Washington, D.C. She's never passed a major piece of a major piece of legislation. She has gotten very wealthy since she started in public office. She continues to vote in favor of sanctuary cities and helping illegal immigrants as opposed to helping the people of this country. And so the president said, Corey, you can win that Senate seat in New Hampshire. You should run. And that's when he and I had a long conversation about the impact on our families. And, when I spoke to Laura Trump yesterday, I asked her, and, I can tell you this because it was a very public conversation. I said, did you ever anticipate that when you married into the Trump family in at that time, 2014, this would be where your life is? And she said, absolutely not. Nothing could have gotten us ready for it. But there is nothing more important to her and her two young children, one who's just 2 months old, than to make sure that Donald Trump is reelected president of the United States, not because it's her father-in-law, but for the future of the country. And I believe in the exact same thing that Laura Trump believes in. There is nothing more important to me than that for the future of our country. And so while the president encouraged me to run for the U.S. Senate, he also understands the impact on our family, and I think he appreciates the fact that I am willing to go all in to do whatever it takes to make sure that he is reelected in November of 2020.
Corey Lewandowski with us. So, Corey, sounds like a decision is going to be put off until after the impeachment, I don't know what you want to call it, the inquiry goes forward a little bit. One of your opponents, I just have to bring this up, and I'm sorry to do it, but it really got to me the other day. One of your opponents running, the retired general, claimed at a campaign event that he had gotten the endorsement of the Republican National Committee. What was that about?
Well, look, with all due respect, I respect the service that Don gave to his country. My family has done that same service. My brother serving in the United States Marine Corps for 23 years. My father in Vietnam in the Army, and my grandfather in World War II. So I respect his service to the country. But that being said, that is a completely inaccurate statement. I can assure you the Republican National Committee has not endorsed Don in this race, nor have they endorsed anybody else in this race, nor will they endorse anybody in this race until I make the decision. And that is the same with the National Republican Senatorial Committee, and for that matter, I don't think any major endorsements are coming forward until my decision is made. And the reason for that is the fundraising numbers for the third quarter, which were released in the last week, were so dismal for these candidates that the national groups are looking at them and saying, are they viable candidates? And when you raise less than $250,000 in a 3-month window to take on an incumbent 2-term U.S. senator who raised more than $2 million, and you have $150,000 or less on hand to spend in a race, that doesn't make you a viable candidate for the United States Senate. And that's not pejorative against anybody. That's just a fact. I have evaluated races my entire life, both as campaign managers and as the Northeast political director for the RNC way back in the 2000-2001 cycle. And I look at a couple factors. What is your name ID? What does your polling data say? How much money do you have on hand? And what does your organization look like? Those are all factors in determining your ability to be successful at the ballot box. And right now, there is no candidate in the race that checks the box on all of those factors. And so I think the National Committee is giving these guys an opportunity to prove that they can be successful candidates. Mm-hmm. But part of that success hinges on your ability to raise money.
Right.
And if you can't do that, you can't take on a 2-term incumbent U.S. senator.
I mean, basically the money that former General, Army Brigadier General Don Bolduc raised would be fine if he was running for county supervisor. I mean, this is not the money you raise to run against Gene Shaheen in the U.S. Senate. But what bothered me about the statement is that obviously he got the confidence to say that somewhere, and a lot of people feel that maybe there's a contingent in the RNC that doesn't want you as a nominee because they can't tell you what to do. Any truth at all to that rumor?
Well, John, there's 100% truth to the rumor that no one's going to tell me what the hell to do, okay? That is a guaranteed lockdown answer that, whether it's the RNC or anybody else, no one tells Corey Lewandowski what to do. That's just not how I roll. I think you know that. I think your listeners know that. And I think there is probably a contingent that's scared to death that I'm going to go and win and become a U.S. senator and do what Donald Trump has done, which is kick the door down in Washington, not play politics as usual, not be beholden to all of the special interests in Washington, D.C. That's just not who I am. But I can assure you, and I am 100% certain of this, there is no endorsement coming from the National Republican Senatorial Committee. There is no endorsement coming from the Republican National Committee, period, end of conversation, for Mr. Bolduc or Corky or Bill O'Brien until I make a decision on what I'm going to do. I have been assured of that at the highest levels of those committees. I have had conversations with the President and others. And I am sure there are people in the state of New Hampshire, and I don't need to punch down and go after Judd Gregg, the former bedwetting U.S. Senator, or Dave Carney, the failed, D.C. operative. I don't need to go after those guys, but I'm sure they want to see Don Bolduc be their nominee because they know they can control him or somebody else in the race, and they know they can't control me. And that's what the people of New Hampshire want. They want a fighter for their values in Washington, D.C. And so, people can make statements which are wholly inaccurate all the time. But as we sit here today, I'm willing to bet anything that there is no endorsement coming from those entities.
Corey Lewandowski, thank you for being with us. Sounds like you're going to make a decision after the first of the year, if I were to gauge our conversation today. But look, none of these people can beat Jeanne Shaheen. So here's the dilemma you have. The president has asked you to run. So that's one thing. He's asked you to run. That's number one. Number two, none of these other candidates can win. So basically, if you don't run, you can cede the seat to Jeanne Shaheen. The other thing you do is you give the Democrats a better chance to win New Hampshire. You get in the race, New Hampshire becomes very difficult for them to win. If Trump wins New Hampshire, he gets reelected. So the stakes are high.
Yeah, they're very high, John, and look, I'm going to continue to evaluate it, and I know what's at stake here. I know the livelihood and what the people of New Hampshire need in Washington, D.C., and that's a fighter. And they haven't had a fighter in Washington, D.C. for a long, long time, and I may just have to go and change that.
You're going to have to do it. Corey Lewandowski, we're out of time. Thank you for being with us. Always a pleasure to have you. All right.
Thanks,
Thank
John.
you, Corey.